So this is a real open-hearted presence. This is a presence that really gets that life is coming and life is going. And one of my favorite teachings on it came from Ajahn Chah, who's a forest monk in the Theravada tradition. And he holds up a glass. And he says, "Do you see this glass?" He says, "I love this glass." He says, "It holds the water admirably. And when the sun shines on it, it reflects the light beautifully. And when I tap it, it has a lovely ring. Yet for me, this glass is already broken. When the wind knocks it over, my elbow knocks it off the shelf and it falls to the ground and shatters, I say, of course. But when I understand that this glass is already broken, every minute with it is precious." So there's this quality when we really allow for everything's coming and going, including these bodies, including those that we most love. There's a sense of how precious this life becomes. I remember some years ago, Thich Nhat Hanh, at a retreat that Thich Nhat Hanh held, the way he closed the retreat. And he had us get into pairs, and then he had us, namaste means I see the divine or the sacred in you, the timeless presence that's here. And then he'd have us hold each other, and with the first breath, we'd mentally whisper to ourselves, "I'm going to die." And then the second breath, "You're going to die." And then with the third breath, this is all while we're holding each other, and we have just these precious moments. So when we're awake and allowing the truth of impermanence, there becomes a quality of cherishing that's possible. And you might imagine what it would be like if all your important decisions, all the choices you are making in your days, all your responses to the people around you, were informed by this understanding of anicca, that it's coming and going. I'm going to die. You're going to die. If that remembrance was there, what life would be like. So you see, so there's a wisdom in it. This is the potential of our evolving consciousness to shift from that sense of impending doom and something's wrong and this is bad when we encounter losses, to a quality of real presence, cherishing, being right here. And the first step that we'll be exploring together is to become mindful of how we go about controlling, because we flip into it really quickly. And we do the controlling for sure when really big things come up, when we sense, oh my God, I'm going to lose this person in my life, or my health is going, we try to fix things. And it's natural, by the way, and it's important that we do what we can, but we over-control. So can we begin to see how we over-control, how many moments, it's not just when big things are happening, how many moments there's a sense that around the corner something bad's going to happen. How many of you have noticed that sense of just it's around the corner? So or a sense of you missed a bullet, but the next thing's going to go wrong. Or we're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, and that right now it might be okay, but I'm going to fail. I'm going to blow it next time in some way, or we're going to lose what we love. So there's a way in which we move through life wired to feel insecure, and then wired to control so bad things won't happen. And we get hooked in it. And there's tension in our body, and it becomes like an armoring that we wear. And we could try to control things by losing ourselves in our thoughts. And if you notice you're obsessing, that's part of controlling. We lock into emotional reactivity, and then we end up behaving in ways to try to protect ourselves. So we're going to look at the ways we control, but I want to just, as I was reflecting on this, I was reminded of a story that Tom Wolfe told in his book, The Right Stuff, that I wanted to share. He describes how during the 1950s, elite military pilots would do a lot of experimental flights with planes at altitudes where the ordinary rules of aerodynamics no longer apply. And they'd get out there, and then the plane would do these wild things. It would tumble around in space, and it wouldn't respond in the ways it was supposed to. And what they did was they recorded the pilots as they were going into their final dive, the one that killed them, and as they were trying to figure it out and make things work. And they'd hear them screaming into the microphone, "I've tried A, I've tried B, I've tried C, I've tried D, what do I do next?" And as it turned out, the more frantically they maneuvered and tried to control things, actually the more terrifying the situation became. So the final solution emerged, interestingly, after test pilot Chuck Yeager was out there, and he hit his head, so he actually stopped controlling things, and he kind of fell through space for 7 miles, and then came into the denser atmosphere, and that's where he could, there's certain levels that we can control things. And that's when he can put the ship back into a spin and steady it and land. So he survived. And the answer to what do you do when things are like out there, like beyond the beyond, is you do absolutely nothing. You sit there and fall. And Wolf puts it this way. He says, you take your hands off the controls. In fact, that's the only choice you had. Okay, so this is a little bit of our guiding theme for this exploration, is that we begin to notice that we habitually overestimate the domain we can control. Every one of us. There's a very narrow band that we actually can manage, and even that, when we're trying to manage it, doesn't always come out so well, because often that we think that we can manage other people. That causes trouble. Some of you might remember a mother's preparing pancakes for her son. Kevin's 5, Ryan's 3. The boys are arguing over who gets the first pancake, and the mother saw an opportunity for a moral lesson. So she says, if Jesus was sitting here, he would say, let my brother have the first pancake. I can wait. So Kevin turned to his younger brother and said, Ryan, you can have the first chance at playing Jesus. So we learn to manipulate. So that's the first area. And it's seemingly, we can get away with it some, but we know that in the long run, what does that do to relationships? So we overestimate the domain. And one of the ways that you might think about it is the domain of, aging, sickness, dying, the domain of how other people act and treat us. Can't really control it. So these are the ways we have the hands on the control. How do we begin to take the hands off the control? You can't will yourself. You can't will yourself to open to the grief or to open to the fear that's here. But there can be a kind of willingness where it's your intention to recognize the control strategies and open into what's actually happening. And we're going to spend the rest of our time exploring how, when we're kind of caught and we're facing loss or living with loss, do we begin to take our hands off the control and open to what's here. So as I often do, I thought I'd begin with my own story, that one of the time in my life that I saw with most clear relief the controller, and how the controller really didn't want to take hands off the controls, was when I was going through that decline, that health decline, and it was over a period of a number of years. But there was one particularly intense phase where I had gone to a retreat, and I had a concussion. And I didn't quite understand the severity of it, and so over the next 6 months I was having all sorts of symptoms. But my controller self was kind of I was kind of denying how sick I felt and pushing myself and staying busy, because there were a lot more rewards to staying busy than having to cancel things and feel like a sick person. And the controller was doing a lot of self-judgment, like, I'm not dealing with this, I'm not figuring out how to fix myself. There was a lot of that. And then I had a real crash because I was pushing too hard and not taking care. And I landed up in the cardiac unit at Fairfax Hospital for a week. And nobody knew what was wrong. All that they knew from symptoms was that I had bradycardia. My blood pressure, my pulse was down so low I wasn't functional. So I was living, this is like a classic example of uncertainty. They didn't know, should we put in a pacemaker? I had every test in the book, and it wasn't coming out very clear. So I was facing this uncertainty. Was I going to have to cancel teaching? Should I just, cancel Wednesday night class? And the controller kind of would kick in and try to figure things out. But I remember one night, I was lying there and a nurse came in and said to me, oh dear, you're feeling badly, aren't you? And she kind of clucked sympathetically and left the room. But there was something about somebody else saying, oh, just that simplicity of you're feeling badly, that softened me. And it's like that part of me that was denying and trying to say, just kind of went to the side, and I was able to begin to touch the fear and the uncertainty. But over that week, the controller kept coming back. And I remember at one moment getting it that I needed to really be with, just really be with. And I remembered a phrase from Chogyam Trungpa, which is, the practice is to meet your edge, what's really happening, and soften. To meet your edge and soften. Over and over again. And that captures the two wings of presence that really are liberating. Meeting our edge is to recognize fully, contact fully, exactly what's here, the truth of the moment. That's the edge. And for me, the edge was fear and grief. And the soften is, meet it with the space that's tender. Soften with it. Let there be heart. Okay, so mindfulness, really contacting, being with, and heart. There's been a lot more research recently on the power of relationships to heal. And now there are healing circles for those that are grieving in hospitals when people get first diagnosed with cancer. There's healing circles for people that are grieving great losses. I also think of it in terms of Joanna Macy bringing together people so they can grieve and feel their despair for the earth. Because, again, we kind of hold it in our own little bubble, and it's almost like when we let other people say what they're grieving, it helps us to open to what's in us. When our hearts break fully open, we become a tender openness. So I'm spending time on this tonight because we often make loss and death and sickness a bad thing. And if we consider it just part of this living, dying experience, then what comes up around it becomes a portal to what's sacred. It becomes a portal to really recognizing more fully who we are. We find right in the center of our sorrows, if you go really into grief, like really open into it, deeper and deeper, what you'll find in the very center is a very timeless and pure love. The grief is for a sense of lost connection. And if you trace it back, you come to the place in you which cherishes connection. And you trace it back even further, you become that cherishing. You become that sense of belonging. So we're really looking at how we engage with this ever-changing world, this world of coming and going, and discover something timeless, some stillness, some eternal quality of loving. But I think it's really important to say that for most of us, the grieving is slow. It has its own organic stops and starts and so on. And it's gradual that we It's over time that we start sensing that shift from really missing, acutely missing a person, to sensing their presence. I'd like to share with you the poem that is probably my favorite poem about this process of grieving. And it's by John O'Donohue, and it's called For Grief. There are days when you wake up happy, again inside the fullness of life, until the moment breaks and you are thrown back onto the black tide of loss. Days when you have your heart back, when you're able to function well, until in the middle of work or encounter, suddenly, with no warning, you are ambushed by grief. It becomes hard to trust yourself. All you can depend on now is that sorrow will remain faithful to itself. More than you, it knows its way, and will find the right time to pull and pull the rope of grief until that coiled hell of tears has reduced to its last drop. Gradually, you will learn acquaintance with the invisible form of your departed. And when the work of grief is done, the wound of loss will heal, and you will have learned to wean your eyes from that gap in the air and be able to enter the hearth in your soul where your loved one has awaited your return all the time.